Organization of Professional Associations of Sri Lanka. Organized by Career Guidance and Skills Development Committee.
OPA and the same as I am the chairman of the Career Guidance and Skill Development Committee. Today's webinar we organized from the committee to address for the public as well as our memberships. So before we start the webinar, I would like to give some introduction about the webinar. The topic is advantages and disadvantages of the online learning and health effects. So we thought as a committee, this is the very timely topic and very important for our public. So those days, throughout the country, throughout the globe, we are facing very crucial situations due to pandemic, that called COVID pandemic situations. So all the sectors has been affected by that, that is called COVID, due to COVID. Even for the learning, very important for the country development and many other factors, but it also affect for the learning activities. So we thought as a committee, we have to address that side. So we selected the very eminent people in the country to address that topic. Before we go for the today's one, I would like to give some pinpoint. Okay, we are a third world country. Always say we are a third world or developing country. But if you go to developed countries like French and New Zealand, there are many there are many areas they are addressing for the this time for the learning. One example is, even though they have what is called restriction for their area, but they are addressing very positive way the learning side, even though they are conducted online activities, online learning, but there are many positive factors rather than us. So if we can get those kind of things to our society, this is beneficial for our people, our children, our parents. So there is a one point I can highlight here. Before we go move out, I would like to introduce my President OPA, Engineer Shanta Shenras, to do a welcome speech for the today's webinar. Over to Engineer Shanta.
Thank you, Engineer Ravi. Good evening to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored and privileged to be a participant of this timely webinar organized by the OPA Career Guidance and Skills Development Committee, a committee that has a vision for the youth of this country. Chairman of the Career Guidance and Skills Development Committee and the General Secretary, all erudite panelists, starting from Professor S.A. Ariyadure, Senior Professor at Open University of Sri Lanka, Dr. Tara Dimel, former Secretary to Ministry of Education, Dr. Chaminda Veerasinghe, Senior Counselor and Psychotherapist, and the moderator, our own Dr. Mrs. Priyanka Jayasundara, a member of the Career Guidance and Skills Development Committee, and all of you, ladies and gentlemen. I very warmly welcome all of you to this webinar. This is the third webinar organized by the Career Guidance and Skills Development Committee during this session. All these programs are very focused and timely webinars on very carefully selected topics. The pandemic has brought many new things also into our day-to-day life. Online education has become the newest feature in distance learning. Our school children as well as the teachers are slowly adapting themselves to this new tool. But every good thing is associated with some harmful things. This webinar is to educate you on both advantages and disadvantages of online learning. Enjoy the program. Over to Engineer Ravi Rupasinghe, the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Shanta Senrath, our president. I think he gave some insight of the our OPA and the career guidance. As president mentioned, we are conducting many programs. I think before come the pandemic, we conduct some workshops, some activities, maybe interactive activity. But after affecting the COVID, we conducted some webinars which is related to career guidance and those kind of areas. But hereafter also we have been planned to conduct very, very important webinars. We will let you know our team, our public. Then, as President mentioned, so I would like to also welcome Professor Ariyadore and Dr. Tara Dimel and Dr. Chandima Veersirivardhana and our moderator in our committee member, Dr. Priyanka Jayasundara. Dr. Priyanka, I think before I hand over to you, I would like to mention some point where we discussed at the last year, March. So we discussed our committee, then we discussed our ESCO and the forum. We need the smart room for our children. So at that time we discussed before government has started and discussion it. In our OPA, we discussed all the Gram Sevaka Kottas, we have to put the smart room to give the learning facility for our students. And the second thing is we have to give our training programs or the education programs through the Rupahani channel. We discussed last year. So those are the points we discussed and forward all the proposal to the relevant authorities. By pointing out those factors, I would like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Priyanka Jayasundara. 1 minute, please. Okay. Actually, she is our very active member in the OPA as well as in the Career Guidance Committee over the last several years. If I give the 1 minute, if I give the brief introduction of our moderator, is a current designation educational management and international training consultant. Is a member of, as I mentioned, Career Guidance and Skill Development Committee. Okay, life member of the OPA. Okay, she's an ex-naval officer and the multi-skill professional, possessing nearly 3 decades of varied local and global experience in education, supply chain management, training of trainers, capacity building, career guidance, mentoring, business management, business entrepreneurial for the SMEs, human resource management, leadership management, and customer relationship management. She conducted workshop and learning in Boston, Kenya, Malaysia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Sri Lanka. Then international accredited trainer in ITC UNO, verified Kahoot educator, EPSL certified coach for online learning and certified facilitator for Tech 2030 Commonwealth Education Trust. She holds a doctorate in management, an MBA in human resource development, and a Bachelor of Art degree. Fellow of the Institute of Supply and Material Management, and the chartered member of the CILT Sri Lanka. Life member of the Organization of Professional Associations and Institute of Quality and Productivity Management. Recipient of the Application Award given in the recognition of exceptional contribution to society at the Genre of Excellence Professional and Career Woman Award 2013-2014, organized by the Women in Management. She's an editor, IQPM, member Supply Chain, Transport and Logistics Committee of OPA, ESCO Committee member of SCILT, Secretary of VILT, Executive Committee member from the inception to date and held the Secretary, Vice Chair position, and currently the Secretary for 2021-22. So she is sharing the experience in many different forums in government and private sector as an advisor, facilitator, trainer, and consultant. Committee member of the National Career Guidance Steering Committee of the Territory Vocational Education Commission, that is TVEC, representing OP in Sri Lanka. I think no doubt about that, she has many vast experience in this subject as well. Okay, so I will hand over that webinar to handle hereafter Dr. Priyangani. Over to you, Dr. Priyangani.
Thank you very much, Engineering Ravi Rupasinghe, for a kind introduction. On behalf of the OPA, it is a great pleasure for me to moderate today's session. Nelson Mandela said, I quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world," unquote. He has emphasized that education plays a major role in learners' life, whether you conduct learning online, offline, remote, or face-to-face. One of the most oft-used terms after the pandemic is the term new normal. The new normal in education is the increased use of online learning tools. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to the closure of educational institutes all over the world, triggered new ways of learning all around the world. Educational institutions are looking towards online learning platforms to continue with the process of educating. This tested the preparedness of schools, universities, and other institutions to deal with a crisis that requires the help of advanced technology, including hardware and software, to enable effective online learning. Such closure accelerate the development of the online learning environments so that learning would not be disrupted. Many institutions have become interested in how to best deliver course content online, engage learners, and conduct assessment. Hence, COVID-19, while being hazard to humanity, has evolved institutions to invest in online learning. However, many are concerned about the health hazard in online learning and its presence a major risk on our emotional and physical health, otherwise known as functional health, which results in trend away from active leisure pursuits and recreational sports and sports and leading us towards the inactive lifestyle. So today we have invited prominent panel to discuss the advantages and disadvantages and the offline learning, online learning and its health effect. So without further ado, first of all, I would like to introduce the first speaker of today's session. Before that, I will read out the brief profile of Professor S.A. Aryadore. Samuel A. Aryadore, Senior Professor in Textile and Apparel Technology, Open University of Sri Lanka. Professor S.A. Aryadore obtained his Bachelor of Engineering degree in Mining Engineering from Osmania University, Hyderabad, India in 1983. Later in 1987, he completed postgraduate diploma in technology in the field of textile technology at the University of Moratuwa, Sri Lanka. After a short stint in the corporate sector, in May 1988, he joined the Department of Textile Technology of the Open University of Sri Lanka as an assistant lecturer. He won the Commonwealth Scholarship in 1994 and proceeded to the United Kingdom for his research studies. In March 1998, he was awarded the Doctor of Philosophy degree by the University of Manchester, Institute of Research in Manchester Institute of Science and Technology, Manchester, United Kingdom. And on his return to Sri Lanka, continued to serve at the OUCL as a senior lecturer until becoming a professor in textile and apparel technology in February 2009. Now, he is currently a senior professor at the OUCL. He has also served as a visiting professor in technical, textile, for the Textile Institute of Pakistan, Karachi from 2008 to 2009. And head of the Textile Research and Innovation Center, Karachi from 2010 to 2011. Professor Ariyadure has served university in various administrative positions, including the Dean of the Faculty Engineering Technology. He also served as a Vice Chancellor of the OESL for 6 years from 2015 to 2021. He has involved in many boards and committees, both in the national and international levels, including as the council member of the Association of Commonwealth Universities based in the United Kingdom. He has published numerous articles in local and international conferences and journals, and addressed many national and international forums as a keynote speaker. He has wide international exposure in the field of higher education, with greater emphasis on open and distance learning. His research interests include distance learning, distance education, open learning, technical textiles engineering, fabric structure and related properties, and textile design. He is an associate of the Textile Institute of UK, member of the Institute of Engineers, India, a chartered textile technologist and certified engineer. He is a recipient of the President Research Award from HE President of Sri Lanka. So I would like to cordially invite Professor Ariyadure to start his presentation, please. Over to you, Professor Ariyadure.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction, and good evening to all of you. Let me start off my presentation, and I'll share my screen. Okay, so this evening I would like to speak on the topic online learning, an insider's viewpoint. It's an insider's viewpoint because in 2003, I was first introduced to online learning in the year 2003 when I underwent a training program by the Commonwealth of Learning. So the Open University of Sri Lanka had an ongoing partnership with COL, and COL, first of all, the first time they came to Sri Lanka and introduced this online learning in 2003 by training selected academic staff members of the university. So I was one of those people who underwent that training. So I have been involved in this online training, online learning for the last 18 years or so at various capacities. So I thought based on my experience, I would highlight some of the issues or the advantages of this online learning. Now, I'll start off with a few headline news from various global newspapers. This is something about some negative thoughts about online learning. We are all aware that online class exams are ineffective. Now, these are recently the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura Teachers Association issued a notice saying that this is ineffective, and then they requested the government to go back to face-to-face teaching. And in India today, on July 18th, all of these are recent news. They're asking, is it fair to put preschoolers through online education? The Sunday Times of Sri Lanka says education during pandemic is blow after blow for students. The New York Times in the USA, it's an experience of a teacher. I taught online school this year. It was a disgrace. And another news from USA, which says it's time to admit it, remote education is a failure. And on the other side of the spectrum, there are positive news as well. The Sri Lankan Sunday Observer says that online learning concept is to continue even beyond pandemic. The USA, we have virtual school is here to stay. And in Guardian of UK says we need revolution in university teaching, and only online lectures can start it. BBC says online teaching to stay, say university leaders. And India today, e-learning is transforming the education sector. So different viewpoints. So who is right? What's correct? Now, when you look at this, all of them are right in their own perspectives. What I'm trying to do the next 10 to 15 minutes is to explain how this is right from all perspectives. Now, I start off with the learning. What is learning, and then certain aspects of learning. Now, from the educationist point of view, ingredients of learning, for effective learning to take place, for effective learning situation, 3 key people are involved. One is the educator, the other one is the learner, then the content. So for the learning to take place, interaction has to take place between the educator, the learner, and the contents. When we talk about contents, the contents include teaching materials, the subject matter, and the physical facilities which are available to transform or convey the message. Now, over the years, there have been many theories of learning. Based on that, what we see is that no 2 students are the same, and the way every person learns varies. Now, brains are unique, and all our experiences contribute to different ways we learn. So based on this, Fleming and Baum in 2006, they introduced a model called Bach model of student learning styles, which means each of those words, letters stand for 4 different words. Visual, some of the people are visual learners, where others are auditory learners, and the others reading, writing preferences, and kinesthetic. Most of the time now, if you look at the research materials, the R is dropped and it's all visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Over the generation, so many educational theories, learning theories have been proposed, even from the time of Plato. In the recent times, we find these 4 theories coming into the research realm. In the early 20th century, say up to 1950 or 1960, the behaviorism theory was prevalent. Then came the cognitivism, then the constructivism, and recently with the digital age, the theory of educations are what is called connectivism. So these are different types of theories. Why I'm telling those things is that when you look at education or learning, every child or every learner has a different learning style and pace. And each child or learner is unique, not only capable of learning, but also capable of succeeding. This is a quote from Robert John Meehan. So that is about learning. With that background, we will look at what is online learning. Now, when it comes to online learning, we see many words are being used. Distance learning, blended learning, online learning, virtual learning, and e-learning. But are all these words the same, or there are differences between them? Let's first look at what is online learning. Now, when it comes to online learning, there are certain attributes have to be there. First of all, in online learning, the pedagogical strategies for instruction and student engagement has to be specific to learning in a virtual environment. So you have to plan it in such a way that the learning takes place in a virtual environment. Invariably, there need to be an internet connection, and there need to be a learning management system. There are different learning management systems, so it has to be there. And this online learning is a form of distance education. And when you look at the other 4, which is distance learning, e-learning, virtual learning, and blended learning, they are subtle, the differences are there. When it comes to distance learning, the main feature of distance learning is the students and teachers are separated by place and time. That's the main difference. That's the main feature of distance learning. But then this distance learning can be not necessarily online learning. Open University of Sri Lanka started in 1980. At that time, there was no online learning. So distance learning is a little different to online learning. When it comes to e-learning, e-learning uses technology for interaction between teacher, learner, and contents. Again, this can happen in a classroom situation as well. Similarly, virtual learning, where the virtual environment of interaction for students is used remote students can have remote access. But again, there it can be also in the classroom or at a distance. Blended learning is a mixed combination of all those things. So it's a combination of classroom, virtual, and online learning. Again, so it can also be. It need not be exclusively online learning. So these are the differences between the different types of words used. Now, when you come to online learning approaches, there is a traditional approach which has been practiced all these years, which is called online course delivery. And in the recent times, after this pandemic situation, we mostly identify it as online learning, which is happening in Sri Lanka and many parts of the world. But then many educationists have identified this as with a special term called emergency remote teaching. I will explain these two, the differences. First of all, we look at online learning, which is the traditional online course delivery. So when you're designing an online course, we will have to look into several dimensions. Here we have your 9 dimensions: modality, pacing, synchrony, instructor involvement, pedagogy, student involvement, student-instructor ratio. So all of these have to be looked into based on what you want to do. There are so many different varieties or the options available for you to put online course online. So this is what is the planning. When you are planning for online courses, this has to be done. But emergency remote teaching is something different. What we have done is that even in Sri Lanka and other countries, we have temporarily shifted the instruction delivery to an alternate delivery mode using online video conference tools due to the crisis circumstances. And so it involves, again, use of fully remote teaching solutions that would be otherwise be delivered face-to-face or as blended or hybrid courses. The primary objective of emergency remote teaching is not to create a robust educational ecosystem, but rather to provide temporary access to instruction and instructional support. So there is a difference between these two. Online course delivery is an LMS platform-based delivery of an entire course or a part of a course, whereas emergency remote teaching is an online channel for delivering a lecture. So it can be the Zoom or the Microsoft Team or Google thing or even televisions. So but then in future, this ERT OCD. But as of now, the emergency remote teaching, which is currently practiced, is not exactly online learning as per currently accepted definition. I don't know, maybe in future, the online learning definitions also might change and it may incorporate emergency remote teaching. But theoretically speaking, actually, as of now, we cannot say emergency remote teaching as a purely online learning. Now, when you want to strategize online learning, we'll have to look at the learning situation. We have already looked at that 3 ingredients are there for learning: educators, learners, and contents. But when it comes to the online learning part, the educators are there are two types of educators. One is the content developers, who are the subject specialists. They develop the content and they put it on the online, and then the online tutors come in and they help the student with the learner support to learn the content. Now, in certain situations, both content developers and online tutors can be the same people, or it can be different people. When it comes to learners, now when you look at the learning situation in the online learning, the learners are all heterogeneous in background. They are of various background. They have various qualifications or qualifications. So they come from various backgrounds. Then as far as the contents are concerned, there are 3 different types of contents available there for online learning. One is the teaching material as it is, then the physical requirements, and also the learner support you provide. So when it comes to teaching materials, it is high quality teaching materials has to be developed in various media so that it will meet the heterogeneous needs of the different backgrounds of people. Now, when it comes to physical requirement, you need a good learning management system. So Moodle, Blackboard, Canvas, those are some of the examples. Moodle is very popular in Sri Lanka. Most universities use Moodle. Then we also need adequate backend infrastructure, including high bandwidth for internet connection to house this LMS, and then provide uninterrupted connection for the students to access the LMS. And the students, from their point of view, they need a device to connect, including adequate internet connection. So these physical requirements are required for a proper online course to be delivered. Then we also need learner support to be given, because students need support. So effective learner support need to be provided through multi-device, multi-mode to the various needs of the students. So it can come in the form of video or radio channels, then it can be web conferencing systems, which will make regular contacts with the students, both synchronously and asynchronously. The students are in remote locations, so all those things are necessary. But then when you look at it, the reality is it's a very big, it's a major challenge in many parts of the world, including Sri Lanka. All of these three is a challenging prospect as of now. Now, I will move on to the issues with online education. There are issues with educators. As the pandemic came in, we immediately switched over to online, and we said the lectures are going online in the TV. There are 2 channels dedicated for teaching, but unfortunately, the teachers are not trying to deliver that online. So what the teachers are doing is they are just practicing whatever they did in the face-to-face session on the screen, and it will not work. For various reasons, this will not work. But one of the main reasons is that the students will not be able to sit in front of a TV or a computer or a mobile phone and listen to 8 to 10 lectures a week. I'm talking about 8 to 10 lectures a week. That's 1 or 2 lectures, more than 2 lectures a week. It's not possible to concentrate. Then mostly in online classes, what happens is online instructors tend to focus on theory than practice. So these are issues with the educators. Then there are issues with learners, because students are mostly watching online alone on a screen, so they cannot be attentive for extended periods of time, and they will invariably lose concentration and move away from their studies. And it requires strong self-motivation and time management skill from the part of the learners to continue engage in learning. Then there are issues with contents. Teaching materials are not available to be offered in the online mode. There are issues with physical resources. There are issues with learner support. EQ issues are there. Connectivity issues are there. Technology limitations are there. So these are all issues with the contents. Then issues with interaction. Mostly these online classes or in emergency remote teaching classes, which are currently conducted on one-way communication, and it's a very minimal interactive components. So it's very limited student feedback, and the students have difficulty to exchange ideas with teachers and their peers. And again, I have said it before, no one can sit in front of the screen and concentrate for long hours. Most sessions cannot go beyond 2 hours. Even then, it has to be interactive. Then most of the time, these sections are now in synchronous teaching, which means that learner has to arrange his own work and join at the same schedule with the whole class. Then there are health issues, behavioral problems, especially among children, lack of development of communication skills and social isolation. I understand Dr. Chaminda Veerasirivardhana will talk a lot on this area. But then that's a major concern. But on the other side, there are benefits of online education as well. Now, when it comes to the online education, it's a very flexible system. When it comes to time, the learner has the freedom to select the time of study if the course is asynchronous, which means the student chooses the time to study. Even in the synchronous system, if it is recorded, the lecture or whatever the content is recorded, made available for later viewing, the student has the time to choose. So that flexibility there. The place is again, it's flexibility. So the learner has the freedom to select the place of study, and learner also has the freedom to select the pace of study. So the online education system gives least disruption to learners, family, social and work life when it comes to adult education. Then the choice available for students is vast because access to best globally available expertise and resources are there. Then the choice is also wider in courses, wider with providers, and also modes, which one you want to select, whether you want text, whether you want video, wide choices there. These are some of the providers, worldwide providers, and the number of courses available with them. As you see there, so almost nearly 200,000 courses are now available online, and we have the enough choice available for the learner. Then the affordability, because it's substantially lesser than the traditional cost. University of Potomac in USA says the online degree, which is offered by them, costs as little as 80 times less than the traditional degree. Even at the Open University, which is not online, this is a distance education type, it's 80,000. We have recently, when we moved to online, many of our activities, we found that we were able to save a lot of money. All of our assessments, when they went online, we have saved a lot of money. So the average cost, even now, the average cost is 80,000, which is online, it will be much cheaper than that. From the student point of view, there is no minimal incidental cost. They don't need to come to the university or the school, where the learning takes place, or the no transport. They can stay in their own hometown, no lodging, no boarding. So it's affordable, it's cheaper. And also learner has the choice based on his financial ability capacity, because most of the online programs are given so flexible that student, based on his affordability, can pace his studies with the amount of money available and do the program leisurely or slowly and complete the degree in a longer period of time. It's also very transformative. Online learning is transformating because it brings in self-discipline on students. It motivates. You need to have motivation, so you will get motivated. Then it's training for self-learning and lifelong learning. So these are important traits which the online learning brings in. One of the things I have heard from our people who have hired our students at the Open University is that this part of this training of self-learning part is the plus for graduates coming out of the Open University. So that is one of the plus point of this online learning or distance learning, and it's all global perspective. Finally, let me say a few words on this. That is, even though there are various issues with online learning, but online learning provides a convenient and efficient means for delivering educational contents with minimal physical constraints. Its flexibility and personalized learning, along with easy access to various educational contents. So it enables optimal and best use of resources, both intellectual, physical, and financial. And I believe many of the prevailing issues which are with this online learning and the negative remarks which are coming for this online learning, they can be overcome through careful planning and innovative practices. Education should not be one size fits all, and technology should be taken advantage of to provide customized learning. So with that, I say the solution is that it lies in correct balancing. So with those few words, let me conclude this session, and thank you very much for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Dr. Priyanka, you are muted. You are muted.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Professor Ariyadure, for very fruitful presentation. I'm sure our audience has a lot of questions to ask you at the end of the session. And now, we would like to move on to the next speaker, Dr. Tara Dimel, MBBS, MPhil, University of London, MD Research. She's a former Secretary, Ministry of Education, and Vice Chairperson, National Education Commission, currently co-founder, Education Forum of Sri Lanka. Dr. Tara D. Mel was a senior lecturer in physiology at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Colombo, until 1996, after which she served as a director, Sri Lanka Foundation Institute. During the years 1987 to 2005, she served as an advisor to the President on social infrastructure, Vice Chairperson Policy, National Education Commission, and Secretary to the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. She steered the work of presidential task forces on general education, university education, and tertiary and vocational education. She served 2 terms as a member of the board of the Commonwealth of Learning in Vancouver, Canada. Since 2017, she has been responsible for designing programs for mindfulness in schools and mindfulness with values and ethic education, and testing the impact of mindfulness in school children. She has been a member of the Global Consultative Group of Mindfulness Initiative UK since 2018. She is currently co-founder, Education Forum Sri Lanka, and Mindfulness Education Sri Lanka, and she is a member of the Worldwide Commission on Educate All Kids Post-Pandemic. In August 2019, she received National Honours, Sri Lanka Sikkamane. So may I cordially invite you, Dr. Tara D. Mel. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Priyanka, and thank you to the OPA for inviting me for this very valuable webinar. Let me just preface my comments on the advantages and the disadvantages of online learning with a brief snapshot of the appreciation of what happened after COVID to an important sector like education. 2020, January or February, we saw the pandemic hit, starting with the most unprecedented public health crisis, followed immediately by the economic crisis. But the third leg of the tripod, the most important and long-lasting crisis, which is the education crisis, was hardly spoken about. It took weeks or months to even start appreciating or rather understanding the type of crisis the education sectors faced. And I'm talking globally for the moment. Overnight, schools were shuttered in about 192 schools, 192 countries. Apparently, even during World War II, this type of universal shutdown did not occur. 1.7 billion students, approximated by UNESCO and UNICEF, were ousted overnight from in-person physical brick and mortar schooling. And the assumption was that this 1.7 billion with a B is immediately going to transfer into online or virtual or internet-based remote learning. That was the assumption. Soon, reality started to dawn. And they found that this large group that was assumed to have gone into online learning, actually, it did not happen that way. Even in the case of economically advantaged countries which are socially high up in the ladder of development, even in countries like Canada, 6% of students did not have internet access or access to good devices. 9% of students in the US did not have broadband or even manageable internet access, nor devices of the nature that Professor Adedure was explaining to us. Of course, the situation in South Asia and Latin America was dismal. Even today in Latin America, we find something like nearly 70% of the school population without any form of access to the typical online education. Ditto for South Asia. So the situation was extremely grim, although the nomenclatures related to remote learning, as Professor Adedure described, the different types of online education started to be spoken of. It was as though everyone was actually engaged in it. Even as up to today, nearly 500 million students, 18 months after the breakout of the pandemic, are out of school. Out of school, meaning out of any form of formal education. Now let's take a look at what happened in our own country. March 2020, 4.3 million students ousted from school education, like we all know. Then we had a situation where the majority had actually nothing to hold on to. Nobody was prepared for it. The government rapidly tried to cobble up television-based education and various other things. But we forgot why we struggled so much and why the transition was not seamless as it was in countries with sometimes a similar socioeconomic situation. The 2019 census showed that 34.11% of the population only had internet access. So that's the first point. The second point, a computer literacy survey, again done in that same period, showed that 22.2% of the households owned, just 22.2%, owned either a PC or a laptop. So just 1.67 million of the population, which is like about 7.8 per 100 people, actually were fixed internet providers. We at Education Forum Sri Lanka started speaking about this in 2020 when we realized that students were struggling to find some form of education. And we found that just about 6% of students only had access to real-time, face-to-face education using Zoom via Google Classrooms or Microsoft Teams or any one of those technologies, only about 5 to 6%. So they too came from privileged households where there were no issues in relation to internet access and computer accessibility. Around the same time, another survey was being done by Learn Asia. This again, I'm talking of about a year ago, 2020 middle. We found that teachers who were struggling to do something to give the students education by the middle of next year started to use feature phones or smartphones, or rather they had to really struggle to own one because most of them couldn't afford it. They started sending WhatsApp messages or Viber, mostly WhatsApp. And what did they send on WhatsApp? Texts, PDF notes based on the textbooks that fortunately the children had, because by the time the pandemic hit and the schools closed, kids already had the textbooks with them. So I call this the WhatsApp education. That reached about 45% of the students as per the surveys we have done. All this, the details of these statistics are available if anybody wants. So by and large, if you look at the Sri Lankan student population of 4.3 million, I could safely say, accurately say, more than 50% of students did not have any form of education. And the online group, the actual online, was less than 10%. So that's the reality. And whenever people speak about COVID, I say I'm immensely thankful to COVID, if not for anything else, but simply for exposing the yawning gap, the huge digital divide that our students have. And I'm talking of school students. So when we look at the prevalence of online education, which we did quickly now, and how useful it is and not, which Professor Aryadure explained, I'm going to just touch on 4 key areas which I see are the main planks on which online education or internet-based education is an issue. Most issues connected to health, I'm sure Dr. Chaminda is going to describe, but physical health issues, including issues like eyes, posture, where kids are straining and watching either a tiny device or a tablet for hours on end. It's a major issue. The mental health issues are, I think, overshadowing the physical health issues now. A wide range of such, from emotional lability to discontent, for social isolation, inability to connect with students on the playground, on the sports field, and that withdrawn, how students get more and more withdrawn as the months went by. And I'm sure those are going to be explained in the next session. Most importantly, out of this mental health group, I see as vulnerability. What were the kids, school kids for the last 18 months vulnerable to? One is they were trapped inside homes. Some had the fortune to stare at a screen, even one device owned by a parent amongst 3 children, perhaps. Staring at a screen inside a room for hours on end, trapped in homes, which could have been abusive. Not all homes have happy situations. Emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and the worst form, sexual abuse. These all rose, as we know, in the last 18 months. Organizations, civil society agencies, which have done studies on this, have shown how dangerous it had been for kids trapped inside homes, unable to contact friends and teachers. What were they also vulnerable to? Cyber predators. They were again lured to the internet. Internet, as you know, is very addictive. The dopamine rush was so much. Students were hooked onto games and other internet generating things. So much so that they became really fodder for internet predators and those who were hunting for this type of situation to prey on in a trapped environment. They were also exposed to stuff like pornography, various types of games that are not suitable for kids. So it's a variety of things that children who were even having this so-called online education went through. And most of the time, kids could not be supervised. Why? Because parents had to go for work. How many parents had the luxury to keep a supervisor or a carer with this child when they went to work? Then comes the fourth important issue that I see with online education, and that was self-ouster. Here was a situation where children are compelled. Why are they compelled? Through the deadlines posed by teachers or by schools or by the examination schedule. When the government did not take an intelligent decision to cancel examinations for 2021, which other countries did, countries like UK, Scotland. When that did not happen, naturally teachers had to pose deadlines. With the deadlines came pressure, enormous pressure, finishing assignments, racing to cover syllabuses, hurrying to finish assignments, and a multitude of factors. All of this built pressure so much that it is found, I think there is documented research in Europe, some parts of Europe, where self-ouster from this online or virtual education forum became very common. And that's a group of students you could never trace. With one press of the button, he or she ousts himself and he's out of education. Nobody even knows. The pressure has resulted in that. I think we all know that today in the Sri Lankan education system, although 350,000 students enter at grade 1, by the time they go to advanced level and sit the A-level exam, nearly 100,000 have dropped out. So this dropout rate is going to increase this year. Why? Because those who oust themselves, either through internet ouster or they're already ousted because they had no internet. That group is going to grow. They're going to consolidate in a form of ouster from education. Sometimes girls may be given in marriage early on in life. Boys or even girls may have to join their parents in their livelihoods to support families. In other words, we lose those children from the education sector, not just the 100,000, much more. So we are going to end up with undereducated or uneducated class of students that's going to enter society, a post-COVID society, which is already vulnerable, already economically fragile. So you can imagine what's going to happen next. What about teachers? today is a topic of teachers. We see them on the roads. Did they also undergo problems connected to online education? The answer is yes, yes, more than yes, because for them, it was a struggle to find devices and data and resources to make them continue some form of even WhatsApp education, and with their meager salaries of 33,000 rupees or 30,000 rupees, it's case of a trained teacher, it was impossible. So we know of stories where teachers have pawned their valuables, they have borrowed money, borrowed devices, and somehow connected with students in their class, in their grades, to make sure that some form of education was given to them. And they had enormous difficulties in learning the technology. They did not know, some of them didn't even know what Zoom was. So it was a self-learning exercise for the teachers, unassisted by the government, unassisted by the Ministry of Education. So it was a very hard time. We at Education Forum Sri Lanka have had several forums with teachers, also with principals and education officials from the zones and the provinces, and we know the kinds of hardship they went through. So I would not just want to stop with painting this gloom and doom picture. I just also want to share some things that can be done. It's not that everything can't be done. Yes, we're a poor country. Yes, we are resource starved, but also we have intelligence, we have capacity, we have understanding, and also we have international connections in the form of development partners. I'm just going to take a minute or two to explain what countries that have been endowed even more, less than us, 5 countries in the African continent, for example, Rwanda stands out as a major example, how within few months of the pandemic, they got together with development partners like UNESCO, etc., and how they developed a master plan, not just to increase devices and broadband internet access, but through satellites and other methods, they developed plans to make sure that their teachers not just got the internet access and the devices they needed to impart teaching, but also to improve their pedagogical necessities, because technology is just one component. Pedagogy is so important, as Dr. Prosario Dure very clearly explained. So there have been countries that do it, and there are development partners around the world who have reached out to such people to help them. So in my view, before I wind up, I just want to give you just a few pointers on what I think we in Sri Lanka should do. Because online education has been a myth, let's face it, let's acknowledge it. It has been more on roof, on treetop, on mountain education, which Professor Dure showed us through one of his slides. So we've not really had online education. Let's be frank about it. So we need to immediately open schools. In-person physical learning has to resume. Yes, this current wave has to subside. Unfortunately, vaccinations have been rolled out. We've been screaming about this for months, but you need to wait at least for 4 to 6 weeks after the second dose to be able to start opening schools. So even small schools, schools that are under 500 population or 400 can be open, and the decision-making should be given to the principal and the MOH of the area. So that's the first point. The second point is, even if this pandemic properly settles next year, even if we don't have another pandemic of this nature, which is very unlikely, pandemics and other catastrophes don't come announced. So we will face another emergency in education in whatever form. What is needed is to provide rapidly access to internet and devices. Government has to take initiative with partners, private providers. The TRC has to take ownership on this. Master plans have to be developed. Multi-service towers had been built in some of the African countries together with their TRC equivalent, taking into consideration radiation and lightning hazards. Bureaucratic bottlenecks have to be cleared, and they can be done. These are not impossibilities. Device subsidies, if not donations, device subsidies urge providers to help governments to provide this. We just have 250,000 teachers. It's not a huge number. And of course, to map out the internet connectivity in terms of school-aged families in every educational division or the Grama Niladhari division. Connectivity mapping is essential. Community connectivity is one thing, school connectivity is another, as everybody knows. So there are many things to do, and none of those, even if those are there, it won't succeed unless new pedagogy is introduced into the system. This is a wonderful opportunity to adapt innovations into the education system, the curriculum. Education reforms are supposed to be rolled out in 2023 or 2024. Those are supposed to be very innovative with problem-based creativity, analytical abilities promoted in the curriculum. What better opportunity than now to trim the curriculum, reduce the content, and introduce this type of pedagogy at a path-breaking milestone like this. So although it's a gloom and doom picture that I painted, online education does have its benefit, and I'm not going to repeat what Professor Aryadure said, particularly in the higher education sector. But Sri Lanka is too small, too poor, too unimaginative to think that it's ever going to have a success story in the school education system. So let's hope things will improve. And I'll be very happy to answer any questions, either post on chat or asked face-to-face. Thank you very much, Dr. Priyanka.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dimel. A very thought-provoking and informative session. I'm sure we will all have so many questions from for the presenters. Now, I would like to introduce just give me 1 minute, please. The next presenter, Dr. Something must have gone wrong. It's not going to the presentation mode. All right. Thank you. Thanks for the patience. Okay. Dr. Chaminda D. Alvis Veerasiriwardana, Senior Counselor and Psychotherapist in Kandy Hospital. Dr. Chaminda Veerasiriwardana obtained his Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery and Postgraduate Diploma in Counseling from University of Colombo, Diploma in Psychology and Higher Certificate of Guidance and Counseling from Institute of Psychological Studies. He is a member of National Institute of Professional Counselors, life member of Sri Lanka Medical Association, and member of National Institute of Professional Counselors. He worked as a counselor and psychotherapist and resource person to island-wide principal training programs conducted by NIE, Central Province, Department of Probation and Social Services, Ministry of Social Service, teachers teaching skill training for Central Province, Ministry of Education, awareness programs in national schools, develop students' learning skills and stress management and resource person to Sri Lanka Rupawahini corporations as well. Dr. Veerasiriwardana has conducted various training programs for Ministry of Health, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Education in Central Province and Western Province, and Sri Lanka Army, Sri Lanka Police, Department and private sector industries such as Mars Group, Suplogic Private Limited, Luck FM Radio, World Vision, as well as several schools in Sri Lanka. So may I cordially invite Dr. Veera Siriwardana to present your presentation. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Give me a minute to open my slideshow. Right. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank this OPA. That is your the Organizational Professional Association of Sri Lanka, for inviting me to share some ideas with this group of professionals about the advantages and the advantages of distance learning. And it is my pleasure to address you all in this evening. So the thing is, with this COVID pandemic situation across the country, as teachers and the parents, we would not let our children's education to be disrupted. We don't like that. So because of that, we had to get adapted to this distance learning system of this process. The thing is, for this, the requirement of these electronic devices is arose because of this pandemic situation. So, but the thing is, as you know, according to our cultural settings, as the first, these electronic devices was mainly used by our children for the entertainment purposes, not for the learning purposes. We all know that. Our students are playing games, watching television, watching movies, right? That is our normal process. Right. So there are only few students or few adults use these devices for the educational purpose. Because of this situation at adult, as we try to keep these electronic devices away from the children, as we try to limit or restrict the access. We have fear. We have a fear about these devices. Most of the time, children are used to play those devices for the entertainment purposes, not for the educational purpose. But unfortunately or fortunately, we don't know that, right? But unfortunately or fortunately, with this COVID situation prevailing in this country, what happened? The distance learning system introduced. Distance learning system introduced. We were forced to give these devices to our children. We were forced to give, but our parents don't like. We are not. We have an intense fear. They have intense fear when we give the devices. They don't know what they are going to do, what kind of things will happen. They have intense fear about this using devices in our children. Right. So then, as I mentioned above, as the devices were kept away from the children, with the restriction and the limit, they were not trained. Actually, our students not trained to use these devices in a useful and effective way of their education. This is the main crisis. We are not trained to our children to do these devices in an effective way. We don't have the proper learning. Only devices we are using for the entertainment, most of our children. Therefore, they mainly focus on using these devices for the entertainment. Then another problem began. That is, our parents have very busy lifestyle. Then children were alone with these devices. And the children were alone these devices, then what happened? Because of that malhabit of these children, so the children's the malhabit, inside the children associated with this technology. So they used to devices for the negatively affective purposes. So our students, they are used to devices for the negatively affective purposes, such as gaming, addiction behaviors. There are so many maladaptive behaviors they are used to use these devices. So my focus, so in this presentation, my focus is describe what are the health hazard or health effect of these devices and the digital learning or ongoing learning. As described by the Dr. Tara Dimel, she told that the global situation of digital learning, she nicely explained the real situation, the actual situation in our country as well as our international.
Excuse me, doctor.
Yeah.
Sorry to disturb you. Are you moving the slides or not yet?
No, no. Now I am
right.
trying to move it now. Okay.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I thought there is a technical issue. Thank you.
No, no. Right. Now, we are in now, the children are in now technical era. We have to come that situation. So when the devices, right? The thing is, when the devices when the devices that we have to use for the learning and other purposes, what happened is there are so many theories and so many things has developed how the screen time is affecting our health. So my main focus is the screen time and the devices, how it affect our health, mentally, emotionally, physically, right? How the screen time and the devices affecting our health. I think Dr. Tara Dimel mentioned most of the part of my lecture, but she described the most of the global situation. I am specifically focused for how screen time and the use of screen, how it affects our brain and the learning and the mental health. Okay. Now, he's the one of the famous researchers. His name is he's a pediatrician as well as he's a professor of pediatric, parent and the researcher who influenced the finding help identify the optimal media exposure for the children. He's the one of the great researcher has found how the screen time affect our brain and the learning and our mental health, right? First, I think we go his findings. He will describe nicely what is happening when we use the devices in an appropriate way. He will describe those things, right? He found when the prolonged exposed to the rapid image changing during the critical period of brain development, right? This is for especially children. This is not the adult. His main focus is exposed to the rapid change during the critical period of brain development. What happened? Preconditioned mind to expect high level of stimulation. So he found when they expect high level of stimulation, what happened? Inattention later in their life. So that when you are using the screen for entertainment purpose, but online learning, we are using for screen for the not the entertainment, for the academic purpose. It's a different aspect. But I will explain what are the health effects on screen, especially blue light, how it affects our brain and the memory system and the sleep. We will discuss in later. But this is the key point. When we are overusing the screen for the entertainment purpose, what happened? The children may develop inattention in their later life. Right. He demonstrated by doing a very fascinating research. I will show it. Right. He chose a group of mice, and 10 days of life. It's a very small one, 10 days of life mice. Then the mice was overstimulated. They are overstimulated by using the sound, the screen, right? There are so many stimulations he provided and overstimulated. 6 hours per day and for about 42 days. 42 days, he overstimulated this mice brain. Then he studied changes in the behavior of the normal mice and the hyperstimulated mice. This is his research finding, right? What he has found is very fascinating result, right? Then we all know the mice always have this what we call the secure. They are highly sensitive for their threat. So they normally mice used to get like these borders, not come to this middle area. You know, these mice always go like that, right? This is their normal behavior. Because they don't like to take risk. The brain is developed not to take risk. That is an intrinsic property of our brain. So if you have a risk, we identify whether there's when there's a risk, suddenly we withdraw or suddenly we escape. So mice also like that. So you can see when the mice was overstimulated, what happened? This is the behaviors of the normal mice. You can see here, this is the normal behavior. They don't come to this risk area. But when the brain is overstimulated, what happens? They come to the risk area. So he concluded that when the brain is overstimulated with screen, there may be a health condition. That is, you are vulnerable for hyperactivity and also vulnerable for risk-taking later in their life. This is his first finding, right? This is not because of the digital learning for the academic purpose. This is when you are using for the entertainment purposes, right? I will explain those things, right? Then what is the second finding is very, right? I will show you the second finding. Then novel object recognition. You know, we all have the learners have what we call the curiosity. We all have a curiosity. The curiosity is the force to, is a key point, key psychological point to motivate for the learning. Once Einstein said, I don't have a special talent, I am fascinately curious. So the curiosity is the key point in learning. So studies, when we are overusing this screen for the entertainment purpose, what happen with the curiosity and the learning? So what he had done is he put these objects into the mice cage, right? These are not familiar to mice. They come and they hit this and they behave around these objects, right? When the objects are familiar, they don't go. They don't go as like we, right? They don't go. So the next steps is he put put out one object. Say about this one, he put out. And before that, he divided this mice group into two groups, and one is overstimulated and other kept at the natural environment. Then he put out this one and add new object to the both cage. What will be the result? The result was fascinating. You can see the normal mice, their behavior is always they used to go to the novel objects. They behave with the novel objects. But you can see the overstimulated group, but they not used to go to this novel object. They always with the same as the family object. So he speculated when the children are overusing these devices or screen, the curiosity will be affected. So we have to carefully guide them, our children, when we are using the screen. Now we are using our screen for the entertainment purposes as well as the academic and the learning purposes. But when we're using the learning purpose, we have another health effect. But when we are using our screen for the entertainment purposes, we have another health effect, right? You can see also he pointed out like this, right? He has found that at the age of 3, most of the time what happened, when the children are stimulated by the devices, not the cognitive programs, they were always stimulated by the television and other devices. What happened is, at the age of 7, more likely to have attention problems, right? Then if the children get cognitive stimulation, like cognitive games and some normal day-to-day our play school activities, and interact with the environment, interact with the parents and the adult, what happened? Less likely to have attention problem in their later life. So that's why we are very careful. When we are very careful by using these devices and the object, whether we are using for the entertainment or whether we are using for the academic purpose. But also he pointed out that when the screens are using for the educational purpose, no harm. But for the entertainment purposes, the harmful effect is 60%. When the children are using this violent, the devices are used for the violent entertainment, like the war films and the murder films and the other violent films, what will happen? There's a high tendency for inattention and the risk of problems at school, more than 110. So it's a huge impact. But what is a positive thing is when we use the educational purpose, these devices and the internet, no direct effect for this behavior and the emotion, right? But another fact I want to point out, that is what? That is the dark side of the blue light. But when we are using these devices, the main point is this dark or blue light. No, blue light has a health hazard, right? Right. So actually it directly affects our sleep cycle. I will explain how it affects our sleep cycle. But this is the main problem when we are using devices for the academic purpose. Academic purpose. Because of this blue light. Every devices normally emit the blue light. So sleep, a basic need of our life, a complex phenomenon. It's not fully understood. Actually, we don't know the correct mechanism of the sleep. It's not inactive state. You are physically inactive, but your brain is very active. Sleep means you are physically active, but your brain is fully active. Right. So how much you sleep? So there are so many sleep researchers around the world. They have found every age has a sleep time, right? This is a graph. You can Google those things. It's a very common thing, right? Then how sleep is regulated? This is very important point. You know, there is a hormone called melatonin. We need melatonin for our sleep health. We should have a good concentration of melatonin. Melatonin is regulated by the light. It's regulated by light. I think this diagram describes it. We don't want to go the finer details. Right. When the light is getting darker, what happens is the melatonin concentration is gradually rising. So when the melatonin is rising, we feel sleepy, and normally we go to the sleep with the melatonin dose. So melatonin also help to maintain our proper sleep, as well as it help to our memory consolidation. Memory consolidation. The melatonin is the well-known hormone to help the learning. It affects our memory consolidation, right? So this is what is the visible blue light. Is a spectrum of our visible light spectrum. Is a blue light is a part of it, right? Then where does blue light come from? Blue light normally come from the sunlight, computers, TV, and the other lights, cell phone, and the tabs, right? There are so many instruments they have identified. There are all these devices emit blue light. Okay. Now blue light interfere with the sleep. This is the phenomenon. This is the health problem. You know, when we are overusing these devices, this blue light go through our eyes, right? And it go to the hypothalamus and shut down the melatonin secretion. Shut down the melatonin secretion. Then what happens? Pineal gland can't produce melatonin because of this over blue light. Not only other part of light, specifically they have found that blue light. Then what is the result? Delay in production of melatonin reduce the amount of melatonin. That melatonin, the reduced amount of melatonin cause lot of problems in our brain as well as in the learning. What are those? For learning and memory. You know, learning, acquisition of the knowledge and the consolidation and the recall, right? Now see, learning, consolidate, and the retrieval. But sleep, the process of consolidation normally happens during the sleep. It's called, there are so many stages in sleep, especially in REM sleep. When it's REM sleep. So consolidation means you store the learning material, learning content, you store the brain. This process is called consolidation. So then poor sleep aggravate or poor sleep affect lot of areas in our life situation. One is your memory consolidation. Most of the students, they are learning till around 10, then they stop the learning, then they try to watch films after that. I have so many students I have met. You know, there are some students, they used to sleep around 2 a.m., 3 a.m. after watching. Most of the time they tell me I am watching because of I have a lot of hard learning in the morning and the evening and the early night, but I need some rest. So because of this rest, I play with these devices. So I saw this, but what will happen? Then it creates the low melatonin. Then what happened? It affects the memory consolidation. So they can't store the things they have learned. So this is a direct effect, right? Another thing is it increase for the risk of communicable diseases. We all know there's a huge problem. This communicable disease all around the world is a huge problem. This communicable disease. So the lack of sleep directly affect our communicable diseases. In the same way, poor sleep also leads to obesity. So when we use this over this screen over, when we are using over and over this, especially the blue light, what will happen? The low melatonin affect our sleep, and children are getting more and more obese. So it may be another health hazard in our part of our health. So, all right. Then reduce sleepiness, increase, right. This is also the smartphone light ruin the sleep schedules and lead to kind of health problem. You can see a lot of health problems it can happen. So the sleep play very important role in our health, right? Then effect of immunity. I think this pandemic area, we need a good immunity, especially with this COVID, what we call this new trait, right? This is what we call the COVID viruses, right? So when when you have lack of sleep, means it directly affects your immune system. So what will happen? There is a vulnerability for getting infection, especially COVID this Delta trait, right? There are so many cases we have. Normally, it's come through our media. Reinfected patient, right? Actually, we don't know what their sleeping cycle. We don't know what their health habit, how they use their screens, right? Okay, now the mental health issues, also the problem. You see the concentration problem may be 68, and the impulse control problem may be 75, and the risk of anxiety is a part of what we call the anxiety disorders, and the aggressive issues, and the risk of depression. These are the mental health issues with poor sleep. Then can you avoid using computers, smartphone, and other blue light emitting devices? It is difficult. We can't keep away those things. Especially this pandemic, we are forced to use those things. So we have to develop the guidelines. We have to develop the real practice of using these devices. We have to give the guidelines to the parents as well as the teachers and the student. Right. So I will take another few minutes to describe what are the practical things that we can use to guide our students and the teachers to the parents, how these devices are using effectively without affecting your health. So decrease day and night time electronic use much as possible. So the number one thing is decrease the day and night time electronic use as much as possible. That is number one. The hour or two before the bed, no electronic devices, do relaxing activity. Ask your students, ask your children, do your screen works most of the daytime, right? But Dr. Taradimel mentioned nicely, most of our teachers, they started their online classes around 11 p.m. 11 p.m. Sometimes it's go to 2 a.m., right? 2 a.m. It is very inappropriate, very destructive behaviors with this pandemic online learning. So an hour or two before the bed, you avoid or keep away these devices and go relax activity or read the printed materials and go and sleep. Then another guideline is make your bedroom screen freeze on. No TV devices from your bedroom, and encourage your kids to do the same. It's another guideline. Right. Then nighttime mode or computer screen. But because of this online learning session, we are forced to do this learning with this computers. What is the best practical thing is we can use the blue light filters, especially nighttime mode or computer screen. Now inbuilt, some computers and some computers as well as the other devices, they introduce the blue light filters. So use the blue light filters. Then it filter the blue light. Then the harmful effect, a certain degree, will reduce. Then blue light filters on your phones. If you're using the cell phone, keep switch on the blue light filters. I mentioned here, these are the blue light filters. All devices now, they have introduced these blue light filters, right? Then night mode reading. When you are reading, use the night mode reading. Then it also reduces the blue light effect. Use the night mode for the reading. And the devices, when you are using the devices in the night, most of the time you use this night mode reading. And also blue light blocking apps. There are so many software development companies, they have introduced so many apps for the blue light blocking. I download and use those things. It also helps to reduce and cut down the blue light. So it also reduces the harmfulness. Right. Then another thing is we can use the blue blocking glasses. We can use the blue light filtering. There are so many glasses they have introduced. Sometimes these are very useful for the student, for the children. When they use these glasses, what happens? It filters the blue light. But the thing is, normally the branded one is over 8,000, maybe around 8,000 branded one. So the thing is the money, right? Okay. Now, right, these are the actually basic things I want to introduce when we are using those devices in this pandemic area. One is the children are, most of the time, they are used to use these devices for the entertainment purpose. But when the children are use these devices for the entertainment, we should careful. We should have careful. Otherwise, there's a huge amount of health hazard. But when you are using the devices for this, what we call the online learning, but the effect is low, but we have to be careful about the blue light, right? So if you use the blue light, so the effective and the adversity is less. So, however, we have to use those things, and we have to go with these devices. We don't know when this pandemic over, but we have to use these things, and we have to be careful, and we have to educate. We have to education. I think I suggest as a government, we should develop the guidelines for the schools and the teachers. We forced to government to develop the proper guidelines how you use these devices in appropriate way, and we have to educate the teachers, the parents, what is the bad effect of this screen, and how the screen use in effective way without avoiding the harmful effect to the brain. Okay, thank you very much for listening my lecture.
Thank you very much for Dr. Chaminda Veerasiriwardana. A very informative presentation. I'm sure we all have a lot of questions. Dr. Veerasiriwardana, could you stop sharing, please?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. So there are a few people have placed their questions in the chat mode. So I would like to give you the first question. Raised by our own OPA president, Engineer Shantha Senarath. He has asked, our teachers need training on virtual teaching. Otherwise, online learning will be a boring exercise for students. Are there any training programs for teachers in school in Sri Lanka? So one of the, I think maybe Professor Ariyadaroy, Dr. Email can answer that question.
The answer to that simply and shortly is no, because online teaching, as we all discussed, was extremely new, thrust upon everybody almost overnight. And in the school system, teacher training did not include the components that were typically needed for teachers who would have to necessarily engage for long hours and long days and now long months on this type of teaching. So to my understanding, there has not been that. And the second issue, or one of the major complaints the teachers had, was even when they somehow they managed to figure out how to do a Zoom class, they did not know how to do it. Just simple use of technology was an issue for them. So that too, they did not get any guidelines, and they had to, hunt around and find. And I think some of the tuition teachers were the ones who actually shared that information with them. And in terms of the most fascinating description of usage of devices and screens by Dr. Chaminda, which I learned so much from, that aspect about how to teach, what time to teach, device usage, harmful effects, I don't think any one of those things have been in any form of teacher education or teacher training program. That's the information I have.
Open University of Sri Lanka.
Because you were muted, I didn't hear.
Okay, Professor, I'll rephrase my question. So Dr. Taradimel explained there is no training program for online training on teachers. So how about our university system and OUSL? Do you have any such a program for academia?
The university system as such, I believe most universities, conventional universities, they don't have, as far as I know. But at the Open University, yes, we do have, because we have a separate Center for Educational Technology. And all of our academic staff members, because with those teachers who come to the university have to undergo a training program called a Certificate in Teaching in Higher Education. So all the Open University teachers, there's a component, compulsory component on this online education, and our Center for Educational Technology does the training program. So that is there for our staff. But as far as I know, it's nothing for the conventional universities. So I completely agree with Dr. Tara Dimel. It's not available, but my university, the Faculty of Education, they are still in the talking. The talking of introducing, or they are discussing of introducing a program on educational technology, because use of these technologies for teachers, because the Faculty of Education is for, so they are still under discussion. I don't know by when that would be introduced, but then they are, it's under discussion now. As of Dr. Tara Dimel has mentioned, I don't think currently we don't have anything.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's high time we start that. Maybe OSL will be able to have some training will be conducted for teachers, because I know the value of that. I have undergo online training technology. I had an opportunity to undergo training, which with the Malaysia professor. I learned so much. From that only, I have become a Kahoot educator and Edpuzzle coaching and facilitator. So because what will happen when you are online learning, your students are remote, you don't know what they are doing. Interaction is not there. So to engage students, you have to find many other ways, and Kahoot games and all these things there. So I request maybe Professor Aryadore from OSL, you can start training our teachers. Okay, next questions asked by Samantha Di Silva Vijayaratna. Who does finally approve the curriculum? The content of the current syllabi in the local school is unbelievably vast. Students take 14 subjects in grade 6. Wow. Who can actually decide this necessity? It's as directed for the Dr. Tara Dimel. Would you like to answer, Doctor?
Yeah. So the decision is almost entirely with the National Institute of Education. The Ministry of Education obviously works with NIE, but the NIE is the final arbitrator, the final decision maker. And yes, grade 6 to 9, there are 13 subjects to my understanding. Most of those subjects are extraordinarily theory-based, even subjects like sports, where for baton relays, the description is how to change the baton from one hand to the other is in the form of diagrams in the textbooks. Similarly for music and dancing. So it's a hugely print heavy, hardly any practical aspects, and it's an extremely unfriendly curriculum for 6 to 9. But the good news is the NIE is in the process of changing this curriculum, trimming the number of subjects drastically from what I understand, moving to more problem-based approaches, an approach which promotes creativity and analysis and thinking and analyzing rather than memorizing and rote learning with factual recall. This is my understanding. But like I said earlier, they could have used this wonderful opportunity where COVID abruptly shut schools and we had ample avenues to innovate. But yet my understanding is that they are going to roll this out in either 2022 or 2023. So a golden and historic opportunity has been lost. So it's a very unfriendly curriculum, 6 to 9. But I just also want to say it's an even more unfriendly curriculum when it comes to the grade 5 scholarship exam. It's a monstrosity that is heaped on a 10-year-old child's head and the parents of that child, the grade 5 scholarship exam. There have been repeated appeals to modify that, because you can't abolish it, obviously, without a substitute, but to modify it, drastically reduce it so that it is a simple intelligence test or a simple aptitude-like test. Just to add on to what Dr. Chaminda said, I know personally of parents who have been keep waking their children up in the last 18 months, those in grades 2 and 3, so that their teacher is just ready to open her online session at 1:30 or 2 in the morning. For what? For preparation of this grade 5 scholarship exam. So if the OPA can become a voice in that, join us at Education Forum Sri Lanka. We are in the process of launching a campaign to reduce the heaviness, this absolute torture, the mental torture to these children who are just barely 10 years old with this kind of grade 5 scholarship exam. So I hope that answers the question that was asked of me.
Thank you, Dr. Dimel. I hope, Samantha, she has answered your questions to your satisfaction.
I want to also add something. I think Dr. Tara Dimel was perfect with the answer. I think even the A-level syllabus, our A-level content is so high. I don't know in anywhere in the world so much is taught at the A-levels. And maybe my colleagues in the universities are also at fault because they expect the students who are coming to the university to come ready. Whereas university entrance is given to only 10% of the students who do the A-levels. And unnecessary burden is given to 90% of the students who are not getting into the universities. I think a total reform in the education sector is necessary and all should cooperate and do something about it. I remember one of my a friend of mine who was from Ireland, when he came here, he said Sri Lanka is destroying its youth by overburdening education and in their adolescent ages. It's very, very pathetic situation. Unfortunate.
Thank you, Doctor. Samantha said, yes, good news about timing at least. Thank you, Dr. Dimel, and I totally agree. Grade 5 exam should be totally a choice.
You also like to add something that? Is it
yes,
okay?
Doctor. Yes, Doctor, please go ahead.
Right. I think I am mainly focused for this grade 5 scholarship exam, as Dr. Tara Dimel said. The thing is, you know, when from age 0 to age 5, this is the critical period of brain development. This is a critical period of brain development. Then the grade age 6 to age 12 is another, our cognitive development is the process of cognitive development is going on. So, but what is the condition we have to maintain is, when the critical period of this brain development, we should not give the toxic type stress to the brain. When we apply the toxic type of stress, this critical period, what will happen? There are so many effects will be the result. One is the brain chemical changes. Other one is the structural change of the brain. I will show you the so many scans and the neurological images. They have identified how the toxic effect and the toxic stress affect our brain development. But most of the education is, they think children are learned by not the brain. They think the children are learned from the stomach. I think most of the syllabus they have planned for, they think the brain like a stomach, right? I have so many arguments at the education ministry, but they don't understand. They don't understand. Especially there is when you have a good brain or what we call we are talking about the brain quality, right? Brain quality is determined by what we call is the executive functions. There are 10 or 8 executive functions. So when we give the huge amount of stress at the development period, what will happen? That poor quality executive function will be the result. Say example, the cognitive flexibility and the impulse control, emotional control, the organizational capacity, and the working memory. These are the basic executive functions of our brain. So there's a famous saying, if you invest the $1 for early childhood development, they have mentioned and they have they have found that if you invest $1 for early childhood development, benefit of the country is $9. Why? How we get this $9 benefit? Because of you develop the quality brain. We use this window period. But this education people, they don't know about this basic science, basic brain science. It's a disaster of our country. So first, I think we have to introduce the brain science to this education ministry. Now we are planning to do that, but they don't like. They have a lot of literature around the brain sciences, but they don't have that lack of knowledge. They know only that Sigmund Freud and the other theories, but they don't know about what are the latest findings about the brain. Now we are in the 2021. Sigmund Freud was 18th, right? So now there are new things has come, but these people, they are not deal with these new things. They do the same thing. I think Madam Tara Dimil know all those things. She's the person who try to stop that wave thing, Madam. You can understand. No, people always think always they are practicing these malpractices in our school. Right? Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Is Jagat Harishchandra. He's asking, how can we cover social and emotional skills development among students through online education? Do we have any success case or program that we can learn from the nationally or internationally? Anyone can answer.
May I give a small input on that? So social emotional learning is, I think most of you all know, it's extremely current. It's almost fashionable in the developed parts of the world. Fortunately, Sri Lanka is catching on slowly to that fashion. And I understand that social emotional learning is also going to be part of the new curriculum that's going to be introduced. So I think we all know that when it comes to social emotional learning, there are just 4 or 5 basic steps that are included in that in a thematic approach, like self-awareness, self-control, be able to take responsible decisions, that is responsible decision-making, interpersonal communication, and a host of things like that. And right at the center of all these pedagogical skills is the practice of mindfulness, because mindfulness develops the brain in different ways. I'm sure Dr. Chaminda and others around here know, like the prefrontal cortex responsible for decision-making sensibly and responsibly, the amygdala to prevent knee-jerk reactions, and the amygdala slows down with mindfulness. It helps us to actually calm down and be responsive rather than reactive. And then the hippocampus, which is also so crucial for our memory and retrieving information and relating it. So all of those are connected with mindfulness, and mindfulness sits as a practice, and it sits at the core of these 5 elements of social emotional learning. So why I'm saying all of this is, all these are practices in countries like the US, some countries in Europe, and definitely some states in the US. They practice this social emotional learning skills. It's a practice. It's not something like for memorization and factual recall. It's not like teaching mathematics or environment or history or anything like that. This is a practice. It's a practice that you have to do with the child inside the classroom in an interactive way, in a wholesome way, with peers. So you can't do it with WhatsApp education or online on-roof, on-tree education. You can't do any one of that in Sri Lanka in that situation. So that's why in our context, it's so important to introduce this into the classroom, and the teachers are hopefully going to get trained eventually in how social emotional learning, which binds everything together. The behavior of the child with the peers, the behavior of the child with teachers, the behavior of the teachers with his or her peers in the staff room. In other words, the entire school academic and non-academic ethos rests in this extremely important social and emotional learning. So in short, what I'm going to say is that remote learning can give the theoretical aspects of SEL, but that's not SEL. So until and unless schools start functioning, hopefully soon, none of this will be able to be appreciated either by the teachers or by the students.
Dr. Priyanka, you are muted.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. Is there any other comments?
Dr. Priyanka, with your permission, I would like to ask some question, maybe two questions, directly forward to the doctor, the mail. I think doctor actually mentioned that even for a developed countries, they have inequity of, that means inequity of the equipment, maybe the facility. So you mentioned that in Asian having the 22% of the equipment which can be lead to the online learning facility. So my question is, looking back to the 1987 to 1989, due to some youth unrest, there was some incident, and some people, some students faced they can't go to schools. Some people they can't go to universities. Okay, there are many incidents, but some students they were at the hospital, they were at their home or their places, sometimes 3 or 4 years period. It has led to the development of the country. It has effect to the development of the country. So my question is, how this pandemic situation will lead to the development of the country? So how we can minimize it? What are the action we can take to minimize those effects which will be lead to the development of the country?
So let me try to rephrase your question to see whether I actually understood it. Due to the students having to stay at home for large periods of time, school or university, and due to the inadequacy of devices and internet, and therefore the lack of education, how is it going to contribute to the development or the lack of development of the country? Is that correct?
Correct. That is my question.
Yeah. So I think I did briefly touch on this. I think it's a very serious set of consequences we can expect, purely because, like I said at the very beginning, I just showed you the stats. We could estimate that 50% or more of students actually had no education at all, not even this WhatsApp education that teachers were sending through their own feature phones. And like I mentioned, I'm repeating, just a tiny, less than 10% of students actually had this so-called online learning. So more than 50% of students, I mean, in the remote, harsh, rural areas of Sri Lanka, sometimes even in the suburban areas of the bigger cities, students had no education. So they were inside homes during the lockdowns, or fortunately when lockdowns were eased, they were able to at least play in the playground. So we are going to have a very serious situation. So take, for example, a student, 2020 March is in grade 3 or grade 4. 2021 March or April, school opened for a few weeks. That child who was in grade 3 immediately got promoted to grade 4 without having had 12 months of an education that the grade 3 child should have had. The child's brain has grown, his body has grown, but he has had no education to go with that. Then what happens in Sri Lanka? Again, let's take the grade 3, grade 4 example. Grade 5 scholarship exam is around the corner. Government has not postponed it. Tuition teachers are speeding to cover syllabuses for the grade 5 scholarship exam. What does this poor student and the parent do? Cobble up some kind of resources, phones, money, data cards, connect the child even at 2 a.m. with online classes. Why? To face the grade 5 scholarship exam. Now, Dr. Chaminda explained clearly what damage we are doing to that child's brain. So coupled with all of that, say 2022 January, say we are safe enough to open schools. I'm hoping. We are going to have a batch of students coming back to school without formal education for nearly 2 years. What are we going to do with them? Are we going to continue with the same curriculum, 13 subjects, overload them to the hilt, put more pressure and torment them, or like some education systems have done? Again, I'm quoting UK, I'm quoting some states in the US, I'm quoting Singapore, I'm quoting some areas like Israel, where they did targeted instruction to students. A child comes starting school at grade 8 without a 1 year's education. That child is not given the kind of syllabus and content for a grade 8-year-old child. It's targeted instruction and all based on learning outcomes, skills, not giving loads of content from textbooks to memorize and regurgitate. So there have been committees appointed by the respective education ministries. Again, I'm quoting Britain because that has the best success story, where their target was A, reduce the content, trim the syllabuses, make them student friendly, make the school environment friendly, because kids came back to school last month, 2 months ago in Britain, as you know. Make schools a comfort zone so that they are not going to get pressurized with academic burdens. And to that end, the teachers were trained. The government had allocated 1.5 billion with the B, 1.5 billion pounds for teacher training in order for the teachers to be equipped to deal with this type of student and this type of training of teachers. It's a really funny story, but I need to say it here. The chief advisor to the Prime Minister of Britain, who was given the task of revamping the curriculum and organizing the teacher training to prepare for student re-entry, said 1.5 billion pounds is not enough. And he resigned overnight because he said, this is a huge task. Our entire future is going to depend on these teenagers who are going to go out into the world of work. They need to get the best when the school resumes, and teachers have to be thoroughly equipped for that. So I'm just trying to tell you the importance other countries are giving to this issue. We are going to have a generation, perhaps 2 generations of students coming into the workforce, into society, undereducated, a mix of emotional, psychological, knotted up minds due to a variety of reasons. And how do you think that's going to affect our development? How do you think that's going to affect our social, cultural, economic ethos?
Thank you, Doctor. I think Chairman, she has addressed a very long, given a long answer. Any of the speakers, if you don't have anything to add, I have 2 questions from the chat box. Chaturika Sevwande, I think she's from University of Ocean University. What are the problems that affect to the education of hyperactive children who use the devices for entertainment purpose? This is for you, Dr. Veerasirvardhana.
Yeah. I think I already discussed with this problem. The thing is, when the hyperactive means there are some errors in this, what we call the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So there are some chemical defect in the prefrontal cortex. So when the hyperactive children are using the devices, what will happen, their hyperactivity will increase. That is the direct effect of when we are using these devices for the entertainment purposes. But the thing is, the image moving speed. Then when we are watching a cartoon, you can see directly the image moving speed is very high. 3 or 4 images is moving within 1 second or 3 seconds. So, but the thing is, when the hyperactive brain also have a same capacity and the same phenomenon, so they can synchronize with this hyperactive screens. So they synchronize with this, and they are addicted to there is a high prevalence or high vulnerability for addict to the screen. So when the hyperactive children are using these devices, it is very dangerous, not like normal children. So definitely we prevent that. Otherwise, their hyperactivity gradually will increase and increase. So there is a lot of problems will create when they give freely to the hyperactive children these devices. When they engaging and entertain, there is a lot of problems they will create and convert into the later in their life. There are so many problems, oppositional disorders, like what we call the conduct disorders and the antisocial personalities. There are so many problems will create if you don't consider these things by the parents. So we have to be careful with the hyperactive children when they are using these devices.
Thank you, Doctor. There's another question from Rohan Kurupu in the chat box. We take teachers for universities without experience in the industry. Therefore, what they teach cannot be understood by students in certain technical subjects. Can we plan a teacher training course for such teachers? I thought NI is supposed to train teachers.
Yes, but the sad thing is even the kind of normal type of training that they should do, there are major issues in the current context as well as generally, I would think. So I think that's a very ambitious project, given the kind of challenges we are faced with right now, particularly bang in the middle of the pandemic with all the issues that we discussed. So perhaps we could keep that aside a little bit, at least for a few months, hopefully until schools reopen and teachers get back to work, hopefully, so that this can be viewed afresh. But I don't know whether Professor Aryadure has anything to add to what I'm saying on this issue.
I think what Dr. Rohan Kurupu says is correct. I think because I also, when I joined the university as a lecturer, before that I had about 1 year of the industry, and I think it immensely helped me. But then I was able to know how the industry functions and all that. So what he says is true, but our system is such that we take students academics directly from the university. Probably within the university system, there is a scope for that. There is a scheme whereby teachers can take about 1 year of leave and get back to the industry. So that system is already available, but very few people make avail of that. Probably university authorities should encourage the academics. I think the question was directed to university academics. So university academics should be asked to go to the industry and spend some time. That system is there because UGC has issued a circular in that the opportunity is there, but normally nobody takes it. I think the administration can encourage people to do that.
Thank you, Professor. Time is running out. Is there any more question? I have a question to ask, but then I would like to give audience the opportunity. Is there any other questions if you all have?
May I have a quick question from Dr. Chaminda, if you don't mind?
Yes, please. Yes, go ahead, Doctor.
Okay.
One quick question, because of the detailed explanations you gave about the use of devices and the precautions we can take within the capacity we have. I would like to urge you to seriously consider talking maybe on the media, maybe television time, maybe arrange a discussion, maybe OPA can facilitate it, and describe the harm, the dangers of the blue light, how to do, what not to do, the types of devices, what kids should not do. Because even, I mean, somebody would be listening. Parents, most teachers are parents. So I think that would be a huge service if you can say that.
I have done, madam, and you know, the ITN school that they have done the ITN that you. I am doctor myself and Dr. Amila. He is a consultant anesthetist in teaching hospital Prevalence. We have done a nice program. What is the relationship between the sleep and the blue light, as well as the what we call is the I talk about the self-awareness and the emotional development and the emotional intelligence. And Dr. Amila, she conducted a very nice program at the ITN school. What is the consequences of this blue light? We have done so many programs in media, madam.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Virasiruvardhana. Is there any more questions from audience? If not, I would like to ask question from Dr. Virasiruvardhana. Now, you have said before you go to sleep, before 2 hours, better to do a relaxing activity, and you suggested to read maybe printed materials or a book. Isn't it better if you do something mind relaxing like a meditation or something like that? Is it good?
Yeah, is it good? But the thing is, when you are doing meditation or relaxation exercise just before the sleep is, the thing is, suddenly you fall asleep. Then what happens is, in the normal time when you try to practice the relaxation exercise, what will be the result? You will sleep. So that's why we are not advised to do the relaxation exercise just before the sleep.
Okay.
Normally, we are not guide to do that, because when you are practicing relaxation exercises before the bedtime, you just read the print materials. It increase your sleep appetite. When you printed materials, we don't like, right? So what happened when you start the print materials, you fall asleep suddenly. The brain don't like that.
Right. Thank you very much, Doctor. I think there is no question, any more questions. Before I wind up, first of all, I would like to thank all the speakers for a very fruitful session. I think I have learned a lot at the health aspect of it. So before we wind up, I would like to have the vote of thanks presented. Unfortunately, according to the agenda, our General Secretary, Ms. Ruchira Gunasekara, attorney at law, couldn't attend due to some unavoidable circumstances. But I would like to invite Dr. Lalita Migoda to present the word of thanks. She is the convener of OPA, Career Guidance and Skill Development Committee. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the OPA, it is a great pleasure for me to say a few words at the conclusion of online seminar on advantages and disadvantages of online teaching and health benefits. I hope you all had a thought-provoking, fruitful, and knowledge-gaining experience from the seminar. Professor S.A. Aryadore, Senior Professor in Textile and Apparel Technology, Open University of Sri Lanka, Dr. Tara Dimil, former Secretary, Ministry of Education and Vice Chairperson, National Education Commission, co-founder, Education Forum, Sri Lanka, and member Worldwide Commission to Educate All Kids Post-Pandemic. And Dr. Chaminda Virasiruvardhana, Medical Officer, Senior Counselor, and Psychotherapist, Kandy Hospital. On behalf of the OPA, I take this opportunity to express our sincere appreciation and heartfelt thanks to all of you distinguished panelists for taking time off from your very busy schedules and sharing your valuable knowledge with us. All of you did excellent presentations. I would especially like to express my sincere gratitude to President, President OPA, the office bearers, the committee members, and the members of the Executive Council, forum members, and the member associations for their assistance in organizing this webinar. I extend my heartfelt thanks to Chairperson of Career Guidance and Skills Development Committee, Engineer Ravi Rupasinghe, and members of the committee for their efforts and dedication towards making this webinar a reality. I greatly appreciate the support extended by the Center Director and the staff of the OPA Secretariat in organizing this webinar. I thank Dr. Priyanka Jayasundara, who did the moderation very well in this webinar. And my sincere thanks for all the online participants, despite your busy schedules. And I wish to extend my gratitude to all others who supported us in numerous ways in organizing this valuable webinar. Thank you, all of you, and good night.
Thank you, Dr. Lalita. I think we are at the end of our session to wind up. I hope everyone else, good night and be safe. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch with the presentation. Good night. Thank you very much.
Good night.